Silicon Valley is quietly panicking, and nobody is saying it out loud. Somewhere right now, a company just cut its AI bill by 90%. Not by using a worse tool. By switching to a Chinese one that costs almost nothing. A year ago, these models were a rounding error. Today, they run nearly half the traffic developers use. Free, fast, and good enough that people are leaving the names they trusted. The real question was never the price. It is what you give up to get it, and who wins when the best tool costs nothing. So let us start with a number that is making people nervous, because once you see it, the panic makes sense. Picture a mid-sized company running a normal amount of AI work every month. Nothing extreme. The kind of low-to-support team or coding tool creates just doing its job. On an American flagship model, that work costs them around $780 a month. The same exact work, run on a Chinese model called DeepSeek, costs about 11. Read that again. 780 against 11. For the same job. Not a discount. A discount is 10% off. This is the same meal costing you $70 at one table and $1 at the table right next to it. If you found that out halfway through dinner, you would feel a little sick. Roughly how a lot of finance teams feel right now. And here's the part that turns nervousness into real fear. The cheap option is not junk. For a huge share of everyday work, the writing, the summarizing, the code, people genuinely cannot tell which answer came from the expensive tool and which came from the nearly free one. Which raises the obvious question. The one every single person watching is already asking, is simple. How is that even possible? How do you hand someone a tool this good and charge them almost nothing for it? That answer is where this story stops being about price and starts being about something a lot of American companies did not see coming. The easy assumption is that China is just selling at a loss to grab attention. Burn money now, win the market, raise prices later. That is the story people expect, because that is the story we have seen 100 times before. But that is not what is happening here, and this is the first thing that should genuinely surprise you. These companies are not losing money on every sale. Analysts estimate they still keep a healthy profit margin on each one, even while charging a fraction of the American price. They are cheap and profitable at the same time. So how? It comes down to a design choice most people never hear about. Think of a giant American model as a single massive brain. Every time you ask it anything, the whole brain wakes up and fires, even for a simple question. Powerful, yes, and also wildly expensive, like starting a freight truck to go buy a carton of milk. Many Chinese models are built differently. Instead of one giant brain, they are more like a building full of specialists. When your question comes in, only the few experts who actually handle that topic wake up. The rest stay asleep. Same quality answer, a tiny fraction of the electricity and computing power burned to produce it. That one difference cascades into everything. They train these models for roughly a tenth of what American labs spend. They run them for a fraction of the cost. And then they do the thing that truly rattled Silicon Valley. They give the model away for anyone to download and use. Which sounds insane until you understand what they get in return. And what they get is far more valuable than a subscription fee. When a Chinese lab gives its model away for free, it is not being generous. The lab is running a strategy, and a ruthless one. Think about what happens the moment a powerful model is free to download. Every startup that could never afford the American price now builds on the free one. Every university, every developer in a country with no AI giant of its own, every weekend tinkerer. They all start building on top of it. And once you have built your product, your workflow, your whole company around a tool, you do not casually rip it out later. So that is the play. You do not sell the tool. You make the tool the foundation everyone else stands on. You become the ground floor of the entire building. There's a name for this that most people have felt without noticing. Same reason a certain phone became impossible to leave, not because switching was technically hard, but because your photos, your messages, your friends, your habits all lived inside it. The lock-in was never a wall. It was comfort. Once everyone around you is using something, leaving stops feeling like a choice. That is what free buys them. Not this month's revenue, but next decade's dependence. While American companies are counting subscriptions, Chinese labs are quietly trying to become the thing the world is built on. And it is working faster than almost anyone predicted. Which brings us to the number that should stop every executive in Silicon Valley cold. The one that turned this from an interesting trend into an emergency. Here is the number. 1 year ago, Chinese models handled less than 2% of the traffic on one of the largest platforms developers use to run AI. Less than 2%. a rounding error. Something you would mention as a curiosity, not a threat. Today, that figure is over 45%. In roughly 12 months, Chinese AI went from almost nothing to nearly half of everything flowing through that platform. Not growth. A takeover happening in slow motion and plain sight while the headlines were busy arguing about which American model scored 2 points higher on some test. And it gets sharper than that. On the same platform, one single Chinese company now runs about 3 times the volume of OpenAI. 3 times. The company that started this entire era, the name that became a verb, is being outshipped by a competitor most people in the West could not name if you asked them. Sit with what that actually means. None of this is a story about the future anymore. It is not China might catch up someday. All of it already happened, quietly, while everyone was looking the other way. The race everyone thought they were watching was not the real race. Now, before you go and switch everything you own to a free Chinese model tomorrow morning, you need to hear the other half of this. Because there is a reason serious companies, the ones with lawyers and a lot to lose, are still hesitating. And that reason is the catch nobody puts on the pricing page. When you use one of these Chinese models through its cheapest, easiest option, your words do not stay with you. Every question you type, every document you paste in, every line of private code travels to a server run by that company, under that company's rules. And for some of them, in some cases, your input can be used to help train the next version of the model. For a student asking about homework, that means nothing. Who cares? But now, picture a hospital feeding in patient records. A law firm pasting a confidential case. A startup dropping in the source code that is the entire reason the company is worth anything. Suddenly, almost free has a price tag again, and it is a terrifying one. And this is exactly why several governments have already banned some of these apps on official devices. Not because the technology is bad, but because they cannot risk where the data ends up. When a government treats a tool as a security threat, that is not marketing noise you can ignore. A warning worth reading twice. Now the honest twist though, because this cuts both ways. That danger mostly applies to the easy hosted version. These models are open. A capable company can download the model and run it entirely on its own machines, where nothing ever leaves the building. The catch is that doing this properly takes real engineering skill. The kind of talent that is scarce and expensive in exactly the Western companies sweating over the price. So the real picture is not cheap and dangerous. Sharper than that. Cheap and safe if you have the expertise to run it yourself. Cheap and risky if you take the easy road. And most people chasing that 90% saving take the easy road without ever reading the fine print. So step back and ask the question the whole video has been building toward. If the cheap tool is often good enough, and the expensive one is only sometimes worth it, who actually wins here? The surprising answer is that the winner is not a country at all. Not America, and not China. The winner is whoever stops being loyal to a logo and starts thinking like a router. In plain terms, what that means is this. The smartest companies have quietly stopped asking which AI is the best. The wrong question now, the question that keeps you overpaying. Instead, they ask, for this specific task, what is the cheapest tool that is still good enough? A simple email reply does not need the most powerful model on Earth. The job needs the one that costs a fraction of a cent. Save the expensive, top-tier model for the handful of hard problems that genuinely require it. Think of it like a hospital. You do not send every patient to the world's leading brain surgeon. Most people need a nurse, a quick check, a simple prescription. You reserve the expensive specialist for the rare case that actually needs them. Run your AI the same way, and your bill collapses without your quality dropping at all. And this is the shift the winners already made. They treat these models as interchangeable tools to be matched to a job, not as teams to cheer for. And once you see the whole picture that way, the last piece of this story falls into place, and it is the part that matters most for you specifically. So, what does all of this actually mean for you, the person watching, who is not running a data center or a hospital? What it means is the era of paying a premium just because a name felt safe is ending. For years, the story was simple. The best AI was American, it was expensive, and you paid because there was no real alternative. That story is over. There is an alternative now. It is often free, and it is good enough for most of what a normal person actually does in a day. But that does not mean you should hand your private life to a server in another country. What it means is the ground under this whole industry just shifted, and the prices you have quietly accepted are about to feel very hard to justify. Watch what the American companies do next because it tells you everything. If they suddenly cut their prices, that is not generosity, just fear. They are finally admitting that free, good enough competition has finally forced their hand. Exactly the thing they spent the last year insisting could never happen. The strange truth is that you win either way. Switch, and you save. If you stay, the pressure of all this cheap competition drags your price down anyway. The only way to lose is to keep believing the most expensive option must be the best one. To keep paying for a gap that, for most of your day, quietly closed a long time ago. So the next time you reach for the biggest, priciest AI out of habit, stop and ask the only question that still matters. For this, right now, do I actually need it? Because the whole world is starting to answer that question honestly, and the answer is reshaping everything.